We are now headed into week 7 of the 2025 college football season, and things are really starting to heat up. Today, I want to go through some of the biggest games in college football for next week, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started, and make some predictions for week 7. Okay, so the first game I want to talk about is East Carolina versus Tulane. Pirates are currently 3-2 with a 1-0 mark in the conference, and Tulane is 4-1 with a 1-0 mark in the conference. This is honestly one of the bigger early games in the American, and Tulane is led by Jake Retzlaff at quarterback, and East Carolina has former blue chip quarterback Catton Hauser. Honestly, this is a pretty well-balanced game, and Tulane is favored by 6.5, but I think they end up winning by probably about 10 points. On Friday, we have another huge game in the American as we have number 24 USF versus North Texas. The Bulls are ranked number 24 in the country and are 4-1, and they got that huge win over the Florida Gators in week 2. North Texas is one of just 15 undefeated teams left in college football, and they have sort of been the surprise of the early season in the American. The South Florida Bulls are led by Berrien Brown and Chaz Nimrod on offense, whereas North Texas' new starting quarterback Drew Mestemaker has been pretty good this year. This is honestly the biggest game at North Texas in quite some time, and I'm honestly going to go with the momentum for them and pick North Texas to win, as they are currently favored by 1.5, and I think the Mean Green get to 6-0, and will celebrate the best start in school history. Washington has been one of the early surprises of the 2025 season as well, and they'll be 4-1 taking on Rutgers at home. The Scarlet Knights are 3-2, and after a good start, they have now blown it 2 straight weeks, and they desperately need to get back on track. Washington is led by an explosive three-headed monster in sophomore quarterback Damon Williams Jr., star running back Jonah Coleman, who already has 10 touchdowns, and projected first-round pick Denzel Boston at wide receiver. Athon Kaliak-Manis has looked a lot better in 2025 for the Knights, and they also have a couple of really good receivers as well, but with Washington being nearly impossible to beat at home, and with all their momentum, I think they get to 5-1 and hand Rutgers their 3rd straight loss. One of the biggest games of this week will be the number 1 Ohio State Buckeyes, who are 5-0, taking on the number 17 ranked Illinois Fighting Illini, who are 5-1. Ohio State has a couple of big wins over both Washington and Texas, and Illinois has a big win over USC and also at Duke. The Illini are led by their senior quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who has 12 touchdowns, and Hank Beatty leads the way at receiver for them. New starting quarterback Julian Sayin already has 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns for the Buckeyes, and true freshman running back Bo Jackson has come out of nowhere. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate lead the way at receiver, and with how dominant Ohio State's defense has been and how much better their offense is starting to look, it's hard for me to pick against Ohio State in this one. Currently, the Buckeyes are favored by 14.5, and I'd honestly pick them to win by 21. I think Illinois is fine, but the last time they played a big-time opponent in Indiana, they got killed. Another huge game is the Missouri Tigers versus the Alabama Crimson Tide. After an early setback in week 1 against Florida State, the Crimson Tide have bounced back as they are now up to number 8 in the country and are 4-1. Missouri has enjoyed another great season under Elijah Drinkwitz as they're ranked number 14 and are still undefeated at 5-0. Bama is led by Ty Simpson, who waited his turn, and then they have Jam Miller at running back, and then both Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams at receiver. Mizzou ended up really hitting in the transfer portal as Bo Prabula leads the way at quarterback, UL Monroe transfer Ahmad Hardy's number 1 in the country in rushing, and Mississippi State transfer Keon Coleman Jr. has been electric. This game is at home, and even though I'm a Mizzou fan, I'm going to try my best not to be biased here. I mean, Bama did just go into Georgia and win that game, so I'm not sure if being on the road is going to make that much of a difference for the Tide, and that's why I think they end up winning. I know Mizzou fans aren't going to like me for that, but Mizzou has honestly been pretty lucky these last 2 seasons, and I think for once they lose one of these home games close. I hope I'm wrong though. One of the more intriguing and underrated matchups of this weekend is going to be number 25 Florida State versus Pittsburgh. The Noles are still ranked number 25 in the nation, despite 2 straight losses to both Virginia and Miami. Tommy Castellanos leads the way at quarterback for them, and it looks like he's regressed a bit, but they still have some other good weapons like Oklahoma transfer Gavin Sawchuk and Deuce Robinson. Pittsburgh is also interesting as they got off to a good start, but had some bad losses to both Louisville and West Virginia, but seemingly they found a gem in their true freshman quarterback last week, and if he starts again, I think Pittsburgh has some momentum and has a chance to keep this one close. While I'm not going to pick Pitt to go in and win this game, I think it's going to be closer than expected, and I think Florida State only wins by 7. Last week, the UCLA Bruins pulled off one of the biggest upsets in college football history, as at 0-4, they knocked off a top 10 Penn State team at home. They will now face off with Michigan State, who is currently 3-2 and desperate to get their first conference win of the season. Jonathan Smith is trying to build something in East Lansing, and Aiden Childs has still not really properly developed. UCLA is obviously led by Nico Iamaleava, and this game I think will honestly be close. I can't tell you why, but I am going to pick Michigan State to win. I don't think UCLA does this 2 weeks in a row, and honestly I think the Spartans are desperate for a win at this point. Speaking of bad teams on the West Coast traveling on the road, the next game I want to talk about is Stanford versus SMU. The Cardinal are currently 2-3 and 1-1 in the conference, and they face off against SMU, who is a preseason top 25 team and was in the playoff last year. They are still led by quarterback Kevin Jennings, and TJ Harden has become the go-to running back for them. SMU has sort of been going under the radar, but they still have a chance. They're still undefeated in conference play, and I think they get to 2-0 and 4-2 overall after a noon win over Stanford. We are now headed back over to the Big 12 as UCF will face off with Cincinnati. After starting out 3-0, the Knights have now dropped 2 straight conference games, and they're sort of in shambles. First-year head coach Scott Frost is going to hope to get things back on track, and meanwhile Cincinnati is riding high. After a Week 1 loss against Nebraska, the Bearcats have rattled off 4 straight wins, including 2 victories in the conference, and they are trying to make a run at the Big 12 this year. They're led by their star quarterback Brendan Sorsby, and Cincinnati just seems to be gutsy. They are at home for this game against UCF, who's struggling with a lot of injuries, and I think the Bearcats win big in this one. For our 10th game of the day, we're going to talk about the Houston Cougars versus the Oklahoma State Cowboys. These two programs are on completely different trajectories right now, as Houston is 4-1 under second-year head coach Willie Fritz, and Oklahoma State is 1-4 and has an interim head coach. The Cougars lost last week to Texas Tech, but they are still fighting as they have Connor Weigman at quarterback and Tanner Koziel at tight end. Oklahoma State is led by Zane Flores, but the quarterback position has not been a strength for the Cowboys, and I don't think it gets any better this upcoming weekend, and they'll drop to 1-5, and Houston will get to 5-1. We're going to talk about the Washington State Cougars versus the Ole Miss Rebels. Washington State has fallen on hard times as they lost John Mateer, Jake Dickert, Ben Arbuckle, and their Power 4 status. They're now desperately trying to pick up the pieces, and it's not going to get any easier as they play an undefeated top 5 Ole Miss team on the road. This game will be over by halftime, and Ole Miss will get to their 6th win in early October. One of the games of the year in the Big Ten is going to happen this weekend as the number 7 Indiana Hoosiers will face off with number 3 Oregon. It is unbelievable to hear those words as an Indiana fan, as Coach Sig has really rebuilt the program and made Indiana football legit. Fernando Mendoza leads the way at quarterback for the Hoosiers. Maryland transfer Roman Hemby has been great at the running back spot, and both Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper could be all Big Ten level receivers. Former 5-star Dante Moore has become one of the best players in the nation for Oregon. True freshman Dyer Hill Jr. has taken the starting running back spot, and a plethora of weapons, including true freshman DeCorian Moore, have taken over for them at the receiver spot. Oregon is fresh off of a couple of wins, including the whiteout game against Penn State, and as much as I like Indiana, I just don't see them winning this game. I think they can keep it close, but ultimately I think Oregon probably wins by 10 points in this one. The Red River game is no longer at noon, which is honestly really weird, and Oklahoma is in an interesting spot. John Mateer is hoping to be back, but if not, Michael Hawkins will start at quarterback, and Texas is fresh off of a loss to Florida, and Arch Manning is struggling. Texas has not lived up to the hype in 2025, and Oklahoma has finally seemingly put it all together. Honestly, I think this game will be close, but I'm going to pick the Sooners to win this one. I think Oklahoma has a real shot at trying to get to the college football playoff, and they'll get a big victory here. Virginia Tech is one of those teams that fired their coach a couple of weeks ago, and they are now off to a 2-4 start and a 1-1 mark in the ACC. Georgia Tech's having one of their best seasons in a long time, as they're ranked number 13 and still undefeated. Haynes King is both their best running back and quarterback, and Georgia Tech likes to run the ball and play defense. Virginia Tech is sort of struggling, as Kyron Drones is still the starting quarterback. But with this game being at home, I think the Yellow Jackets take care of business and win this game by 14 points and get to 6-0. Staying in the quote-unquote ACC, we have the NC State Wolfpack taking on Notre Dame. Notre Dame was reeling after losing their first 2 games to A&M and Miami, but they have bounced back with 3 straight wins and are now up to number 16 in the country. Redshirt freshman CJ Carr has been marvelous. Their running back room of Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have been nearly unstoppable, and the defense is getting better. NC State is led by their redshirt freshman quarterback C.J. Bailey. Hollywood Smothers is one of the top running backs in all of college football, but I don't really think it matters. I don't think this NC State team is all that good, and while it probably should be close at halftime, Notre Dame is favored by 21.5 points, and I think they win by 14. Iowa State enjoyed a 5-0 start to this season, but I knew the wheels were going to come falling off as I picked Cincinnati to win last week. Iowa State will now play on the road against Colorado and will try to avoid their second straight road loss. The Cyclones are obviously led by Rocco Becht at quarterback, Carson Hansen at running back, and then Colorado's still trying to figure things out. They're off to an 0-3 start and a 2-4 record overall in the Big 12, and Coach Prime needs to get things going. Caden Salter has not exactly been the answer at quarterback, and with this game being at home, I do think it'll end up being close, but I think Iowa State guts it out and gets to their 6th win of the year. Penn State dropped one of the worst games in school history last week to UCLA, and they have a chance at potentially doing it again. Northwestern's probably the second worst team in the Big Ten this year, and if they somehow find a way to lose at home to them, I think the sky will actually start falling. Except that's not how it'll go. Northwestern has struggled horrendously this year, and I think Penn State is going to be tired of hearing about how bad they are. I think Drew Aller is going to come out and have a really good game, and Penn State absolutely will blast Northwestern this week, and I think win by at least 28 points. Staying in the Big Ten, we have one of the more underrated matchups of the week as the 4-1 Nebraska Cornhuskers will take on the 4-1 Maryland Terrapins. Maryland dropped a game late last week to Washington, and they could have been 5-0, and Nebraska's only loss ended up being against Michigan. This is one of the more difficult games to pick, as Maryland doesn't typically have a home crowd, and Nebraska also loves to lose close games. I do think this game is actually going to come down to one possession, and I can't tell you why, but my gut is saying that Nebraska's going to pull it off and get to 5-1. Maryland typically struggles after the month of September, so I think they're going to lose this game. Oregon State has been horrendously disappointing in 2025, and I'm not really sure who to blame. They fired a couple of coordinators, and they're going to host Wake Forest. The Deacons are under first-year head coach Jake Dickert, who's actually made them competitive. They almost knocked off Georgia Tech, and they're 3-2. If Wake Forest can get a win here, which I think they will, they'll advance to 4-2, and they have a chance at making a bowl game in year 1, which would be huge for them. And for our 20th game of the day, we're going to talk about TCU and Kansas State. Going into the offseason, this would have been one of the bigger games in the conference, but TCU ended up having a loss a couple of weeks ago, and K-State's had a really weird season. They ended up losing to Army and almost lost to North Dakota, but it does seem like the Wildcats are getting better. TCU is led by Josh Hoover, who's one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football right now, but that doesn't matter. For some reason, my gut is telling me that Kansas State's going to pull this game off, as I don't think they're as bad as a team as they were in September, so honestly I think Kansas State is going to defend home and win this game and pull off an upset against TCU. Up next, we go back over to the SEC and talk about Arkansas versus Tennessee. The Razorbacks have a really good quarterback in Taylon Green, but that's about the only thing that's gone well for them in 2025. They've already fired their head coach, and at 2-3, the season looks over. Tennessee, on the other hand, is 4-1, ranked number 12, and are a field goal make away from being undefeated. Joey Aguilar and Chris Brazzell II have been incredible on offense this year, and I think Tennessee rolls and wins this game by a lot. The Florida Gators got a huge win last week at home against Texas, and now they're going to have to go on the road and play against Texas A&M, who's 5-0 and ranked number 5 in the nation. A&M is shockingly only favored by 8.5, and that's because Florida's had a good defense this year. I'm still not totally sold on DJ Lagway, but I do think Florida will hang around. Ultimately, I'm going to pick Texas A&M to win because they have a lot of talented skill players like Kevin Concepcion, Mario Craver, and Le'Veon Moss, plus Marcel Reed. But as I said, I think this game could end up being closer than expected, but A&M will end up winning and get to 6-0. Another night game will be between two of the most boring teams in the country, as the 3-2 Iowa Hawkeyes will travel on the road to play against the 2-3 Wisconsin Badger. Luke Fickell is seemingly on the hot seat now, and he could get fired here soon, unfortunately, but he has a chance to pull off a win against a rival in Iowa. The Hawkeyes are led by Mark Gronowski at quarterback, and things just have not exactly gone according to plan for either team. This game is bigger for Iowa than Wisconsin, though, as the Hawkeyes have a better chance at a good season, and that's why I think they're to go into Camp Randall and win this game by a field goal. Going back over to the Big 12, I think we're going to have one of the games of the weekend in the 4-2 Kansas Jayhawks facing off with 5-0 Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are off to one of their best starts in school history, as they are currently 5-0 and led by a crazy quarterback in Baron Morton. Jalen Daniels is back for his 6th year at Kansas, and he's also putting up ridiculous numbers. Kansas has a really good offense, but I'm not sure if they're going to be able to go on the road and beat Texas Tech. I do think this game will be electric, and I think the Red Raiders end up winning by one possession. Back over in the SEC, the number 10 Georgia Bulldogs, who are 4-1, will face off on the road against Auburn, who is 3-2. The Tigers have dropped 2 straight games by 1 possession, and Hugh Freeze is finally hoping to pull off a conference win. Georgia, on the other hand, is still looking to find their stride, as it seems like things have not exactly come together for them. Gunnar Stockton is getting better, Chauncey Bowens is good at running back, and the receivers are decent, but we'll see if they can put it all together. I think Georgia is the better team in this one, and I don't think Auburn's going to pull off the upset, but I do think it'll be thrilling, and I do think it'll end up being close. The Michigan Wolverines are now ranked number 15 in the nation, and they're going to travel on the road to USC, who is 4-1. Michigan's only loss came against Oklahoma, and USC's only loss came against Illinois. The Wolverines are led by true freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood, and Justice Haynes has now become one of the best running backs in all of college football. USC has an explosive offense led by Jaden Mayava at quarterback, Wayman Jordan at running back, and both Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon at wide receiver. I think this game will end up being close, but I'm going to pick the upset and say USC wins this one. I think USC has the more explosive offense, and I'm still not yet completely sold on the Wolverines. Up next, we have a game in the Big Ten between 2 teams that desperately need a win. In first year under head coach Barry Odom, Purdue is currently 2-3 and 0-2 in the conference, and Minnesota is 3-2 with a 1-1 mark in the Big Ten. The Boilers are led by Ryan Brown and Devin Mockabee, and Minnesota is led by new quarterback Drake Lindsey. Minnesota got absolutely throttled last weekend by Ohio State, and Purdue ended up losing a semi-close game against Illinois. Purdue has just not been able to get luck on their side this year, and I don't think it's going to change much this weekend, as for some reason Minnesota is typically Purdue's kryptonite, and with this game being at home, I think Minnesota will start their annual rise in October and win this game and get to 4-2. We still have 4 more games to talk about this week, and the first one is Clemson on the road against Boston College. The Tigers are 2-3 with a 1-2 mark in the ACC, and Boston College is 1-4 with an 0-3 mark. It's been sort of a disastrous season for Boston College, as early on they lost a couple of close games. Meanwhile, for Clemson, it was a terrible start to the season. I think we all know how this game is going to go, though, as I think Clemson's going to go into Chestnut Hill and completely dominate. I think, honestly, the wind has been knocked out of Boston College's sails, and they could end up being the worst team in the ACC when it's all said and done, and Clemson will get back to 500. One of the most thrilling games of 2024 was South Carolina at home against LSU, and this time LSU will host the Gamecocks. The Gamecocks are led by quarterback LaNorris Sellers, and LSU has quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. Both of these guys are supposed to be first-round picks, and I think this game will end up being really fascinating. At full health, Sellers could be one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, but going in and beating LSU is extremely difficult. The Tigers just most recently lost to Ole Miss, and Brian Kelly is fighting for a college football playoff spot, so with this game being at home, I do think LSU ends up winning, but South Carolina will keep it competitive. Second to last game will be between the number 18 BYU Cougars and the 4-1 Arizona Wildcats. BYU has enjoyed a second straight undefeated start to their season, and they're led by a true freshman quarterback in Bear Bachmeier. LJ Martin and Chase Roberts have also been great weapons for them. Meanwhile, Arizona's had a bounce-back season after a disastrous first year under Brent Brennan. Noah Fafita is looking like his old self again, and with the Wildcats being 4-1, I think BYU is due for a loss. I don't have any rhyme or reason for it, but I think Arizona is going to pull off a late-night upset in this one and get to 5-1. And our final game of Week 7 is the Arizona State Sun Devils against the Utah Utes. This is now a very intriguing and fascinating Big 12 game that has serious conference implications. The Sun Devils ended up having an early loss to Mississippi State, but they have bounced back. Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson have been one of the best duos in all of college football, and on the other side, Utah has bounced back after a bad 2024 season, led by their new quarterback Devon Dampier from New Mexico. Utah is always tough to beat in general, and with this game being at home, I do think Utah is going to end up winning it close, and they'll be able to jump into the polls next week. But what do you guys think? What are your predictions for Week 7? What did I get right and wrong? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.